In 2016, Brazil was supposed to be riding high, cementing its status as a rising global economic superpower. Its economy had been growing at a blistering pace, outpacing countries like India and Italy, and it was closing in on France and the UK in pure economic output. The 2000s were Brazil's golden years. Life expectancy improved, healthcare and education expanded, average incomes grew, and investor confidence surged. Political stability seemed to be on the rise. Social mobility was improving, and even Brazil's currency, the real, gained strength. Brazil wasn't just succeeding domestically, it was poised to be a regional leader, serving as a hub for trade and growth across South America. Yet by 2016, the dream had unraveled. What should have been a triumphant moment, the Rio Olympics, turned into a symbol of Brazil's deeper problems. The Olympic facilities were barely completed, public servants went on strike, and the immense cost of hosting the Games bankrupted Rio de Janeiro. Instead of showcasing its success, Brazil broadcast its struggles to the world. The Olympics were just one symptom of a larger crisis. Brazil's GDP had contracted sharply, losing almost half its value compared to its peak. Corruption scandals and political instability rocked the nation, undoing many of the gains made during the 2000s. How did Brazil rise so quickly, collapse so spectacularly, and does it have any hope of a resurgence? Let's delve into this compelling story of boom, bust, and potential rebirth. The foundations of Brazil's economic rise. Brazil's journey to economic prominence in the 2000s wasn't without its hurdles. The 1990s were a particularly turbulent time, marked by severe hyperinflation. In January 1990 alone, inflation reached 56%, rising to 84% by March. This level of economic instability forced the government to take drastic action. Key measures included price freezes. To curb runaway inflation, the government froze prices on essential goods and services. Privatization. Inefficient state-owned enterprises were sold off to encourage productivity and attract foreign investment. Trade liberalization. Brazil opened its economy to international trade, making it more competitive. Indexation ban. Brazil banned a system that automatically adjusted wages to match inflation. While controversial, this helped break the wage price spiral that fueled inflation. By 1994, the Brazilian government introduced a new currency, the real, as part of the Plano Real Economic Stabilization Plan. This wasn't the first time Brazil had replaced its currency. Hyperinflation had plagued the country for decades. However, this time, the government coupled the new currency with structural reforms that restored confidence in the economy. Brazil's natural advantages also played a critical role in its recovery. With a land area of over 8.5 million square kilometers and vast natural resources, including iron ore, soybeans, and oil, Brazil was well-positioned to benefit from the global commodities boom of the early 2000s. Its large workforce, numbering over 100 million, provided an additional edge, particularly as labor costs remained relatively low. The 2000s, Brazil's economic boom. By the early 2000s, Brazil had transformed into one of the world's fastest-growing economies. The stability provided by the real, combined with privatization and increased exports, fueled this growth. One of the biggest drivers was China, which was undergoing rapid industrialization and needed vast quantities of raw materials. Brazil became a key supplier of iron ore, soybeans, and crude oil to the Chinese market. Brazil's newfound prosperity extended beyond economic metrics. The government invested in healthcare, education, and social programs, lifting millions of people out of poverty. Politically, the nation appeared stable, and it gained global recognition as one of the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. A group of emerging economies with significant global influence. Even during the 2008 global financial crisis, Brazil showed resilience. While other countries faced severe economic contractions, Brazil weathered the storm relatively well, thanks to its export-driven economy and limited exposure to the complex financial instruments that caused the crisis. By 2010, Brazil's GDP was growing at over 7% annually, and it was hailed as an economic success story. The collapse, corruption, and commodities. Despite its remarkable rise, Brazil's economic foundation was fragile, heavily reliant on exports and vulnerable to corruption. The car wash scandal. In 2014, a seemingly small money laundering investigation, Operation Car Wash, uncovered one of the largest corruption scandals in modern history. The scandal revolved around Petrobras, Brazil's state-owned oil company. Billions of dollars were siphoned off through inflated contracts, with funds used to enrich politicians and finance election campaigns. The fallout was devastating. Investor confidence plummeted, leading to capital flight. Petrobras, once a symbol of Brazil's economic potential, became a liability, dragging down GDP by 0.75% in 2015. Public trust in government eroded, fueling protests and political instability. Falling commodity prices. Around the same time, global commodity prices began to decline. For an export-driven economy like Brazil's, this was catastrophic. Countries like Canada and Australia, which also rely on natural resource exports, managed to weather the downturn better because of their geographic advantages and diversified economies. Brazil, however, faced higher transportation costs due to its dense rainforests and expensive shipping routes. The combination of corruption and falling exports triggered a vicious cycle. As revenue dried up, the government struggled to fund public services, infrastructure projects stalled, unemployment rose, and skilled workers began leaving the country in search of better opportunities. A phenomenon dubbed the Brazilian diaspora. The current challenges. Brazil faces a host of structural issues that continue to hinder its recovery. Brain drain. Many of Brazil's brightest minds are emigrating to countries like the US and China, further weakening the country's potential for innovation. Debt and deficits. Rising government spending, particularly on pensions, has strained public finances. The falling value of the real makes it harder to service debt. Infrastructure gaps. Transporting goods across Brazil remains costly and inefficient, particularly through the Amazon. Efforts to improve infrastructure often face global backlash due to deforestation concerns. Political instability, corruption scandals, and contested elections have undermined confidence in the government's ability to lead. The Rio Olympics in 2016 epitomized Brazil's struggles. While the event briefly brought global attention, the costs were staggering, and the contrast between gleaming Olympic venues and nearby slums highlighted the country's deep inequalities. Can Brazil bounce back? Despite these challenges, Brazil's long-term potential remains significant. The country still has vast natural resources, a large workforce, and a strategic position in the global economy. To achieve this, the country must address its structural issues, invest in innovation, and rebuild trust in its institutions.